Hello Buckeyes, Tomcats. Today's lesson is Unit 5, Lesson 12B, Reflecting to Create Shapes. Now last week we worked on plotting points and then reflecting those points over a line. Now today we're going to be reflecting points over the axes to create polygons. So in order to do that, we are going to do a little bit of review what to do now. Number one says point G is the point 3, -1. Now you'll see on here that there is no point G. And if you look down here, you'll see why. This question here is asking which point is 5 units from point G. Is it point A, point B, point C, or point D? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot 3, -1, and label it G. Now I see that there could be a few options for which point is 5 units away from point G. So I'm going to count from G to D. I can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm looking for 5, so I know it's not D. C would be way too far away, and that's diagonal, and we haven't gone over diagonal yet, so that is not possible there, 5 units. Now I look at point A, and I see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4 units away, and again I'm looking for 5. So my only option is point B, and I'm going to count that just to make sure. I can see that G is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units away from point B. Now question number 2 tells you that the coordinates of point A are -6, 4. The coordinates of point B are 3, 4. Now I want you to tell me which expression represents the distance in units between points A and B. Now you can see that it's not asking you to evaluate, you're just looking for the expression here. So I see that my coordinates are here and here, and I look for the thing that they have in common. I see that they both have a 4 in common. So I'm going to get rid of those. I'm just going to ignore those for right now. What else I can do is I know that I need to find how far they are away from 0. I know that I need to find the absolute value of -6, and I know that I need to find the absolute value of 3. So I need -6 and 3, so I can get rid of this one and this one, and just focus on these two here. Now, we talked about a couple things, what to do if the signs are the same and what to do if the signs are different. Well, here we have a -6 and we have a +3. Now, if the signs are the same, you subtract. But in this case, the signs are different, so we're going to add. So letter A is the correct choice here. Now on the next page, we're going to be doing our skill builder section, and this is going to be evaluating this expression here. Remember, evaluate is another word for solve. It could also say simplify. If it said simplify the expression, you would know that that means to solve also. And then you're going to be plotting these points on a number line. This right here is 1. So you know that this goes from 0 to 1. Now I'll give you just 1 minute to go through and solve this page. Go ahead. Now, if you need more time here, you can go ahead and pause the video. Question number 1, evaluating the expression. I know that negative 2 and 35 hundredths is 2 and 35 hundredths away from 0, and I'm adding that to 1 and 5 tenths, which is 1 and 5 tenths away from 0. So I add those together, and I'm going to put them vertically so I can line up the decimal. So I have 2 and 35 hundredths plus 1 and 5 tenths. Now I'm going to add the 0 to the end of 1 and 5 tenths just so I can fill in my digits. Now I've got 5 plus 0 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and I bring down my decimal. And now I add 2 plus 1 to give me 3. So the expression is equal to 3 and 85 hundredths. Now number 2 is asking you to plot the numbers on the number line below. I have A, B, C, and D. Now if you were like me, the first thing you did was figure out what these hash marks stood for. And if you count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you would see that each of these is worth 1 tenth. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fill in my number line with tenths. And now I can plot these a little easier. The first one is a little bit more than 9 tenths. Right here, this is going to be my point A. Now my point B is somewhere between 7 tenths and 8 tenths, and I see that it's 0.76. That 6 means that it's a little bit closer to 8. So that's my point B. Now my point C is in between 2 tenths and 3 tenths, and I see that it's a little bit less than halfway in between. So this is going to be right around here with the letter C, and then D. 3 tenths, just a tiny bit higher than 3 tenths, and that's going to be right about here, and that is letter D. And obviously there's no answer to fill in here, so you get rid of that. And then flip the page. Today's aim. Students will be able to reflect points in the coordinate plane. Now this is something we did last week, and now we're just kind of taking this to the next level. Now, number 1 is telling you that point A and point B are plotted on the coordinate grid below. You can see point A and point B. Now, further down, this is asking you to reflect points A and B across the y-axis and label them with A1 and B1. And then you're going to write the coordinates of the points below. So the first thing I'm going to do is recognize that I need to reflect them across the y-axis. So I'm going to find the y-axis, and that's the one that goes straight up and down. So I have my y-axis found here, and all I need to do is reflect these across. So I'm going to find my point A, and I can see that it's 1, 2, 3 spaces to the y-axis. So I'm going to go 3 more spaces. 1, 2, 3. Plot my point and label it A1. Now my second point is B. I can see that it's 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the y-axis. So I'm going to go 3 more. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to plot my point B1. Now, here is asking to write the new coordinates of A1 and B1. So, A1, I can see that is at run 3, jump 6, 3, 6. And then my point B is at run 3, jump 1, 2. Run 3, jump 2. Now, number 2, or part B, is asking what type of polygon is formed when you connect A to B, B to A1, and A1 to B1. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll connect these 4 points. Now you should be able to look at this and tell me what type of polygon is formed. I can see that this has a height that is different than the length, and I can see that there are 4 sides. So this is a rectangle. And again, I knew it was a rectangle because it had 1, 2, 3, and 4 right angles, and opposite sides were equal in length. Now, part C is asking me to find the perimeter. So what I'm going to do, I need to find the length of all of these line segments. So from A to A1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A length of 6 plus this length of 1, 2, 3, 4. Length from here to here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then finally, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I can add these all together to get my perimeter. So go ahead and take about 10 seconds to add these together to find your perimeter. Six plus 4 is 10. 6 plus 4 is 10. And I get a perimeter of 20 units. Go ahead and flip the page. Now we're to the guided practice portion. This is where I want you to practice some stuff on your own, or I'll go over the answers just in case you need a little bit of help. Now I'm going to give you 1 minute, and I'd like you to spend that 1 minute trying to figure out which axis point C was reflected across, and then I'd like you to explain in a complete sentence how you knew which axis it was reflected across. So 1 minute. Make sure you're writing in a complete sentence. The point C, 4, 3 is reflected and has new coordinates of C1, which is at -4, 3. Now, which axis was point C reflected across? It was the y-axis. Now, some of you might be asking, Mr. B, how did you know that? Well, I knew it was reflected across the y-axis because the x coordinate changed its sign. So here my x coordinate is my 4, which changed to a -4, which means I know that it reflected from this side to this side, or from this side to this side. I knew it was reflected across the y-axis because the x-coordinate changed its sign. Now on number 3, I have the points G, which is at 2, -8, and H, which is at 2, -6. And those points are reflected across the y-axis and connected to form a rectangle. So, I want to know what the coordinates are of the reflected points. So if I look back to the sentence here, I know that it was reflected across the y-axis because the x coordinate changed its sign. So I know that my x coordinate comes first and then my y coordinate follows. So if I reflect my g coordinate across the y-axis, my x coordinate is going to stay the same. So it's going to change to -2, -8. Now if my h is also being reflected across the y-axis, it's my x coordinate that's going to change. So go ahead and write the new coordinate for h1. Since I know that if I reflect across the y-axis, the x-coordinate is the one that changes its sign, I know that that 2 is going to become a -2, and my new point is going to be -2, -6. So I have now my 4 points, my 4 vertices, which is important for forming a rectangle. And now, this portion down here, point B, is asking to find the distance between the points. Now, remember, the distance between the points is like finding the length of the sides of the rectangle. So, I want to find between G and G1, which would be, ignore my -8s, and I have the absolute value of -2 and the absolute value of 2. Now, if the signs are the same, you subtract, but here the signs are different, so I'm going to add. 2 is 2 away from, -2 is 2 away from 0, 2 is 2 units away from 0, so add them up, and I get 4 units. Now I want to know the distance between H and H1. H is at 2, -6. H1 is at -2, -6. So I'm going to plot, or write my expression of -2 absolute value plus the absolute value of 2. And again, this would give me 4 units. Now I'd like you to find the distance between G and H, and then the distance between G1 and H1. Now I'll give you 1 minute, and if you need a little bit more space to show your work, feel free to use this big space down here. 1 minute, go ahead. So you should have written an expression for the distance between G and H. I know that G is at 2, -8, and H is at 2, -6, so I can ignore the 2's here. Now I have the absolute value of -8 and the absolute value of -6. Now, what do I do when the signs are the same? Sign, same, subtract. So the absolute value of -8 is 8. The absolute value of -6 is 6. So 8 minus 2 means I have a distance between the two of 2 units. Now the distance between G1 and H1, right here. I have the negative 2's that are in common. I can ignore those. So I have the absolute value of negative 8 and the absolute value of negative 6. Now, if the signs are the same, I need to subtract. Negative 8 is 8 units away from 0. Negative 6 is 6 units away from 0. So 8 minus 6 gives me an answer of 2 units. And now what I have here are the lengths of the sides of my rectangle. So I should be able to find the perimeter of my rectangle. And I can do that by adding up my lengths. I have 4 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2. 4 plus 4 is 8, plus 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. Remembering not to have any naked numbers, 12 units. And you've now reflected 2 points across one of the axes and found its perimeter without ever having to look at a coordinate plane. Now remember, if you need a little bit more time, feel free to rewind this video. If not, this is now time for independent practice. If you'd like to listen to Pandora, that's fine. Just remember, I don't want to hear it. The rest of the time is yours to work on independent practice. When you finish, you can open your book or work on your first set of homework. Go ahead.